So my name is Jerry White, and I'm the Socialist Equality Party's candidate for U.S. Vice President.
So the breaking story right now is Israel is bombing Rafah. They're bombing the displacement camps. We've seen images of beheaded babies, people who've been eviscerated by 2,000-pound bombs. Like, what's your take on everything that's going on right now?
Well, I mean, it's another extension of a massive war crime that is being carried out against the Palestinian people. Of course, it's in defiance of the International Court of Justice ruling. But the fact is that none of this would be possible without the military, financial, and political support of the Biden administration and both capitalist parties. And the fact of the matter is that they are, as you said, they've just bombed a displacement camp in a so-called safe zone. Right. And they are deliberately implementing a policy, what they consider the final solution to the Palestinian question.
So I guess the crux of what we got to get to here is, what would an anti-Zionist foreign policy look like for you?
Well, first of all, let me make the point that there is deep discontent and horror in the working class over the crimes that the U.S. is supporting in Rafah and throughout Gaza. But there's no means through which the working class can express this opposition within a two-party, corporate-controlled political system. So you have the Democrats, who are an absolute warmongers. You got Trump, who is a warmonger, but he's able actually to palm himself off as an anti-war candidate precisely because the Democrats are so blood-soaked. But what the Socialist Equality Party is fighting for is the mobilization of the working class, the great social force which has the power to halt the production and shipment of weapons to Israel, and also to stop the even greater horrors that are being prepared. Because as horrific as what is going on in Gaza is, the United States and the European imperialist powers are now planning to send troops into Ukraine, which means a direct confrontation with Russia, a nuclear-armed government. We're fighting for the unity of the working class, the Ukrainian and Russian workers against both Zelensky and Putin. In fact, we have a young comrade, a socialist, a 25-year-old socialist named Bogdan Sirakyuk, who is now in Zelensky's prisons because he's fighting for the unity of Russian and Ukrainian workers together. But the essential issue that we're seeking to raise is that appeals to the conscience of the warmongers. It's now 8 months since there's been passionate protests, but that has not shifted their policy, and it won't. We're fighting to mobilize the working class against these wars. And I just would like to make the point right now, there are thousands of University of California grad students and other academic workers that are on strike explicitly to protect their students against the police crackdown. Right. But the crisis is, or the problem is the UAW apparatus, the United Auto Workers Union apparatus, has already endorsed the re-election of Genocide Joe. Right. So the union apparatus is trying to limit the strike to just a handful of campuses, even though all 50,000 UC grad workers want a unified strike. So we're fighting to help these workers build a movement from below, a rank-and-file movement to take the conduct of the struggle in their own hands. And we are going to factories in the Detroit area to inform workers about this strike, because the UAW is not even telling auto workers about the UC strike.
Yeah, and how do you feel, because the UAW is very proud of their work with, like, Nelson Mandela came to visit Detroit during South African apartheid and stuff like that. Like, what kind of comparisons would you draw to that time to what's going on now?
Well, I was very politically active at the time in the 1990s. And actually, to tell you the truth, look, there was a revolution emerging in South Africa, and it was being led, in fact, by miners, auto workers, and so on. And that caused a great crisis for American and British imperialism. And they sought to bring in Nelson Mandela and the African National Congress to have a peaceful transition away from apartheid while preserving capitalism inside of South Africa. And today, South Africa is among the most unequal of societies. And Ramaphosa, the former leader of the National Union of Mine Workers, who's the president, is a billionaire. So the transition to black capitalism did not solve the horrific problems of the working class inside of South Africa or anywhere else. We're fighting to build a movement of the working class for socialism. In the United States, in Europe, in South Africa, in the Middle East, we believe in a united socialist states of the Middle East where Arabs and Jews can live under a secular society without apartheid and not be controlled by the giant oil corporations or the Arab ruling elites who have all, betrayed the Palestinian people.
Awesome. Okay, so I want to ask you about your platform, but before the other parts of your platform, but before we move on, is there any closing thoughts about the Palestinian issue or Ukraine, Russia, anything like that?
Yeah, well, the fact is that, this election between a warmonger, Biden, and a would-be dictator, Trump, just demonstrates the complete bankruptcy of American capitalism. The fact is they are spending $1 trillion a year on war, while they're talking about eliminating 380,000 educators' jobs in the next 2 years because Biden has allowed COVID school funding to run out. There is deep discontent, but we have to build a political alternative, a socialist political alternative to the two capitalist parties. And while we absolutely support the right of students to carry out these protests, and we are opposed to the police crackdown, these issues cannot be resolved on the campuses. They must be resolved in the factories, in the warehouses, in the working class, and we're fighting to build that leadership.
Okay, and I'm sure you hear this all the time as you're trying to get on the ballot as a third-party candidate, and we hear this all the time in America that third parties are spoilers. So I'm interested in your take on the idea of being a spoiler candidate.
Well, the ruling elite, the Democratic Party, has actually announced they've set up a special unit in Michigan and other battleground states explicitly to keep third parties off the ballot. And it's not so much that they're concerned about losing to Trump. The fact is that there's a de facto government of national unity between the Democrats and Republicans on every single issue, including the persecution of the anti-genocide protesters. Biden is actually in an alliance with real anti-Semites, real neo-Nazis, denouncing youth, including Jewish youth, for anti-Semitism. So we're saying that the argument about lesser of two evils, which has been used for 100 years to block the working class from developing its own politically independent and socialist movement, you can't argue that. There is no lesser of two evils in this election. They both are for war, they're both for inequality, they're both for dictatorship. So we're fighting to build, and of course, look, we realize that, we're fighting to get on the ballot here, and it requires 12,000 signatures. We know the Democrats are going to try to keep us off the ballot, but we're running in these elections to raise the political consciousness of the working class and its independent initiative. And I want to urge your watchers to come to our website, socialism2024.org, to find out about our campaign. Joseph Kishore is running for president, and I'm running for vice president.
Right. Okay. Any closing thoughts that you'd like to share with us while we wind up?
While you wind up. Well, again, I do want to raise the importance of the University of California strike. It's a political strike. The working class is beginning to intervene as a political force against war. But we have to build a revolutionary and socialist leadership in the working class. I also want to urge everyone to support the demand that our comrade in Ukraine, Bogdan Sirachchuk, that he be liberated. You can also go to our website to sign a petition to demand his freedom.